Okay, hello everyone.
Hi,
I hope
Carol.
I hope you're all staying safe. And for those of you new to digital transitions, I know we have many customers and many participants that have been in previous sessions of our Project Lemonade, but Digital Transitions Division of Cultural Heritage provides preservation grade imaging solutions, hardware, software, and services through our new partnership with Pixel Acuity. And we're so thrilled to have you here with us today. I'm Carol Wilczewski, and I'm the Western Regional Sales Manager for DT, Cultural Heritage, and Pixel Acuity. This edition of Project Lemonade is a very thought-provoking topic, rethinking object photography of cultural heritage. It's an encore performance because we've presented this before with rave reviews. We have two customers and collaborators and great friends of digital transitions presenting today. So I'd like to introduce them. I'll start with Tawny Cracchiola from the Getty Villa. Tawny is a lead photographer at the Getty Villa Imaging Studios. She has over 22 years of industry experience, and she brings a unique artistry and production to her role as a cultural heritage photographer. At the Getty, she's a leader in establishing best practices and quality standards for conservation, promotion, and publication photography. Kevin Canlin is from the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. Kevin came to the Asian Art Museum in 2015, and as a commercial photographer, he has experience creating and producing photography for editorial, catalog, and advertising for various national and local clients in San Francisco. And as a photographer, he has always gravitated towards objects and the spaces they occupy. So with that said, I'd like to turn the microphone and the video over to our great presenters, Tawny and Kevin, and welcome them and thank them for this great information. Take it away.
All right, here we go.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Kevin, are we on?
We are on. You have your screen and we're ready to go.
All right. Here we are. Every object has a story, and we are the storytellers. Narratives that are rich in history, as you see here in this gold leaf painting, is the story of Joseph.
In the left-hand loggia, Jacob, seated on a throne, sends Joseph to his half-brothers, who are tending sheep in the field.
In the far left corner, the brothers, jealous of their father's love for Joseph, strip him of his jacket and throw him into a pit. And the brothers again, as you see here, show a blood-smeared coat to their father as evidence that Joseph is dead.
As museum photographers and archivists, we are the visual storytellers by using our craft to light the art to reveal that story. For paintings such as described here, we use the balanced two-light setup to illuminate the surface and tell the story that is already being told. For three-dimensional photography, we are charged with telling a different narrative, visually using light and shadow as our medium to tell that story.
So when lit using what we call a fine art approach, where the scene has a main source of light coming from one direction, in this case from above, and strategic secondary lights used to form shape, the centaur is truly leaping forward, and we are now engaged with the scene on the surface of this cup.
The final photograph in the published book matches the words by curator Cecil Colonna from the French Museum. She says, "This cup shows a disheveled female centaur with a forlorn expression. A cupid precariously balanced on a lyre helps himself to a piece of fruit from the basket. Another holds little pieces of fruit or perhaps hazelnuts. with which he threatens to pelt the centaur.
So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session, The Fine Art Documentation, Rethinking Object Photography of Cultural Heritage. Thank you, Carol, for such a really kind introduction this morning. And it's such a pleasure to be invited to this venue and to have the opportunity to present with Kevin again. My name's Tani Cracchiola, as you know, and I'm the lead photographer for the J. Paul Getty Museum in the Getty Digital Imaging Department within the Trust. I specialize in photographing outdoor sculpture, architecture, and gardens, as well as three-dimensional objects of the Antiquities collection at the Getty Villa. And in the studios, I work beside and train the crew on set building and lighting for various materials from glass, gems, terracotta, silver, marble, and the like.
And I am Kevin Canlon, photographer for the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. Thanks to DT for hosting all of us, and Carol, thank you for the intro. It's a privilege to be presenting with Tani. My position is more of a generalist, as I am the sole photographer at the Asian. We have a large collection of two-dimensional objects, manuscripts, prints, hand scrolls, and large textiles. I also photograph new exhibits, and it's great to be one of the first to spend time in an empty exhibit. However, the collection constitutes of a lot of objects, from very small netsuke to large Buddhist stone stelae. And this is where my previous experience helps, building a set to light and capture an object.
So Kevin and I are here today to discuss the photography of three-dimensional objects, specifically concentrating on 3 points: the practice of engaging in collaboration with your fellow museum curators, the importance of how we light three-dimensional objects, and why these components are vital to the business and future of cultural heritage. But first, we need to define, what do we mean by the fine art approach to documentation?
So what do we mean by the fine art approach? Wikipedia will tell you that simply capturing what you see in an artistic way is the art of photography, and not creating fine art. So contrary to this traditional meaning of fine art, there is actually no universally agreed upon meaning or definition of what fine art photography actually is. But what we do know for sure is that Tani and I are not suggesting that you whack out your focus or over dramatize your object or shoot from some crazy angle. We all need to stay within the guidelines of our prospective museums. We have responsibility to be accurate. However, what we are suggesting is to stretch the vision beyond the traditional two-light setup. And we're talking about going back to the roots of traditional photography using directional light and fill light to create shape and form. To begin with a strong focal point and use the position of your camera to emphasize the power and the beauty of the object on set. Our goal is to tell the story of the object beyond the standard two-light documentation.
So we believe that this concept of the fine art approach helps us to become better visual storytellers. And I think it all starts with the execution of the set build and where the main light will be directed, which is often custom to each object. Silver cards, silver objects here, as you see, may need to be completely tinted or not, where the black void of the space above or in front of the object helps define shape. And then with silver cards, which are incredibly useful to add dimension and highlights. But fair warning, be careful which light shapers and reflectors you use, because it's easy to introduce false warmth and color into our sets. And as guardians of documenting objects within the specialized arena of cultural heritage, we must stay true to our objects. Accuracy is paramount.
And as powerful as light is, shadow is the necessary complement. One has to keep some shadow at all times to reveal the shape. If there's no shadow, your image is probably too flat. And back to the direction of lighting. I've made a conscious decision to light primarily from the right. When I first arrived, I noticed that most scripts come from right to left. So my thinking was the eye in those cultures would also move in that direction. Converse to Western script.
As image makers, we are storytellers. We compose, we light, we define mood, all in one image to reveal art. We are all experts in our field, photographing hundreds of views on a weekly basis. And we build and craft light to reveal texture and shape. We are archivists documenting history. And we are photographers sculpting with light. We've honed our craft to the point that most museum departments actually have no idea the magic that's going on inside our studios.
We make this work look so easy from the outside. Our contribution often goes unseen. And this is where Tawny and I started our conversation. We both believe it's time to shake it up a bit and open up the gates of our studios to the curators. Let's start the process of building a collaboration and creative conversation on how we photograph our collections.
So I know, I get it. Hold it right there. And I realize that the vast majority of museum collections and archives are two-dimensional works. However, from time to time, a figurine, a marble head, or a vase may pass through your studio. And our hope is that this presentation will strike a chord. We believe that this practice will lead to greater collaboration within your institution and help you achieve a more comprehensive approach to your documentation of three-dimensional objects. I'd like to present an alternative way of working that is practiced at the Getty Villa that perhaps will enhance your final images of three-dimensional objects.
And the first step in sharing our vision for telling the story is collaboration. Now let's discuss the practice of engaging in collaboration with your fellow museum curators. When I first met Tawny at the Digital Transitions Roundtable in Los Angeles, we quickly realized that we had a lot in common around the issues and methods we use to approach object photography for museums. We also compared the context with departments such as curatorial and publications and how they tended to or not interact with the photographers. Our institutions are quite different in size and personnel. However, we connected and saw quite a few similarities on several topics. And a little background for me, perhaps. When I arrived at the Asian Art Museum several years ago, I had a general idea of the needs for collections photography. However, I was unsure of the total methodology. As I got to know the collection in more depth, I found that we had groups of items, but that everything was unique. Image-wise, we had a huge backlog of photography due to poor digital adoption and the resulting image quality. And I was given the message to move quickly, to take one shot and move on. But it became obvious to me that one image would not tell the full story of an object. No one image would do it all. And in my first contact with some of the curators, I would ask for some input or direction, and some would say, do what you think is best. And I was surprised by this. After working with art directors and designers for years, I was surprised that the point of view from a curator, although some curators are slightly more definitive, was rather vague. Pointing out details for three-dimensional work was helpful, and I started to produce what I called the basics. And if it was a more important object arrived on my set, I would do what I called the full workup. And as a freelancer, I always wanted a happy client. So this left me wondering, who is my client? Who am I doing this photography for?
So what is our goal and what is the end game? The first step to any successful collaboration is to start a dialogue with your client and discuss the objectives of the finished product. So in many museums, photo requests are sent digitally to the photography department, and the photographer works independently following the instructions written on the page. After delivery of final photography, those assets are then uploaded directly to the archive and made available to the curators and the museum at large. So you guys all get the drill. In my experience, often not a single word is spoken between the photographer and the curator. In fact, the extent of the communication is usually, well, just put it on the set and turn it. The reality of that statement is a direct misconception of our craft as museum photographers and what really happens in the studio when an object arrives on set.
As you may have noticed, imagery has become a major asset for cultural heritage institutions. It's no longer just the coffee table book or the poster of the digital age. The images are now the digital footprint of the collection. And today, with most of our museums closed at the moment, this statement is truer than ever. Our images are the virtual museum. It is often the first impression that a potential visitor will have. But from the back end of these assets, we've noticed a problem. There's a lack of communication between the photographers who are doing the work and the many users who disseminate this imagery that is so important to the visibility and relevance of a museum today. So with that said, ultimately, our audience is our mission. At the beginning of any photography shoot, there's many questions when the object arrives on your set as you size it up and review the notes from the request or project. And this inner voice stems from the core of the mind of a photographer who works with others to illustrate a concept or tell the object's story. So tighter collaboration delivers a better product. Why collaboration? Because it benefits us all and the institution as well. And a case in point, here's a time lapse of a monumental photo shoot at the Getty Villa of a collection of large Apulian vases. And as you can see, just like at the Asian, none of us are alone in this process. It takes many talented museum personnel to collaborate in unison with museum photographers. Every part of the process has an expert to carry the job to the next step, especially a large production such as this.
So we had about 2 days to set up and photograph in this gallery before the next exhibition was to be installed. Are we running the video?
I see it.
Excellent. The concept of the set was visualized by our curator, then passed to the design team to create the layout. The set was then built and painted to spec by our incredibly talented prep department. We work with full-size mock-ups on camera first before the actual vases here were installed. And the preps drilled into the deck for each individual vase. So remember, it's California, so we have to be ready for an earthquake at any moment, even if the vases are only up for a day. And then we have to remember perspective through the lens. Slightly changes, right? When the layout is overlapping, you can see when the handles start to overlap, and we had to make adjustments right on the spot. So no time could be wasted, and we had to move with precision. And an expert from every department of the museum was on set, as well as the lone curator from Naples, to observe the installation side by side with our Getty conservators and curators. It took over 24 teammates to pull this off. Kevin, will you give me a cue to move to the next slide, please?
Your screen, if you would share your screen.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
One moment. Hold on, stand by.
Thanks for everybody. Thank you for your patience. And then presenter view. Excellent.
All right, everybody up again? Kat?
Perfect.
All right, here we go. So here are the lovely faces of the 11 key players showcased here that worked on this incredible shoot. An incredible thank you to Rebecca Truskowski for partnering me on this very colossal event. All right, here we go. Here's the final shot. Then the end, it was truly a dance, if you will, as you guys saw, of curators, photographers, technicians, mount makers, preparators, registrar, and design to create the final masterpiece of capturing these objects together for the first time in history in one photograph. And then they had to deinstall it all, right, to then install for the real exhibition. So lots happening behind the scenes to get something like this. So, okay, why is collaboration so important to me? I came into the museum environment solely as a photographer with very little knowledge of ancient art and its history. But I did arrive on the scene with the passion to photograph art beautifully and tap into the vision of how the artist intended for their art to be viewed in antiquity. And I needed a curator to guide me in these efforts and help me answer these questions. So this is where the whole fine art approach idea was visualized. And to my surprise, a new relationship was on the horizon. He was tall, dark, and no, it's not what you think. This is Tiberius, an 8-foot bronze sculpture from Herculaneum that landed into our studios in 2012 at the Villa. I was asked to take a beauty shot of him for promotional material. So remember, this is different type of photography that we would normally do for like conservation or regular type of work. So here we are. And like most objects that arrived in the studio in the early days, my basic approach would be to set my camera height positioned at the middle of the sculpture. But there was something odd about this particular object. He was top heavy, and his upper shroud and shoulders are much wider than the rest of the body. And every image I took of him looked odd, as if he was falling towards me. And even a longer focal length didn't fix the issue. So I called the curator working on the exhibition into the studio to discuss this dilemma. And he wasn't surprised. The curator shared with me the strong possibility that this particular statue is positioned in antiquity on top of a 2-story building. And his viewers would have been looking up at him. So most likely the artist designed him disproportionately. So when seen from the ground level, he appeared in proportion. So with this idea in mind, it'd be better for me to position camera level at his knees with the lens 45 degrees pointing up. So it got me thinking, what other information do curators have about the objects I'm photographing that can speed up my production? So at this moment, I realized the importance of having the curator on set, and their knowledge can guide my work to help me reveal the story and beauty of the object beyond the standard catalog style documentation. So this idea opened up a new perspective on how I photograph ancient art. It wasn't solely about documentation anymore. I became a storyteller in the process of how this object was crafted and why.
And this is a great lesson in our classical understanding. This is referring to entasis, the classic iconic perspective trick. And I think it was well known in Asia too. We have the same issue at the museum with Buddhas. One is not intended to look down at the Buddha, but up. And as you know, some of them are quite large. So consequently, many of the heads of the sculptures or Buddhas are oversized. But however, these attributes are not always obvious. So in preparing for a shoot, I will read the didactic and review previous photography if it's available. I have found it's easier to work alone, but not always the best. In this scenario, the lack of communication can be a lost opportunity. It could be a missed angle, an unnoticed detail, and these are extremely painful. On the flip side, if there's too many people involved, the message can get convoluted. It's important that the essential stakeholders are in the room. It's true that some curators do not communicate what is needed for the final photographic product. But however, a simple conversation or visit can be invaluable. To add, what I've experienced is that many people do not realize how long it takes to make a good, clear, accurate, well-lit, and complex photograph.
This practice is important because there's a balance of skill sets of different viewpoints of photographer and curator that can change the way we photograph art. So lighting, position, rotation, etc. So before I review our curator workflow, I'd like to introduce the Villa imaging crew. So at the Villa, we are 6 professionals squeezed into an itty-bitty working space. So it's important that we work well together. We have Ben Goddard, imaging technician, Manny Perez, imaging technician. We have Megan Fisher, project coordinator for the center and the Villa, Nikki Nakagawa, photographer, Rebecca Truskowski, senior photographer, and myself. So together, we are a dynamic crew, and I am grateful to be part of this team. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of how we work. The Villa crew and I work with the curators on set to determine height of camera, angle of camera, and the position of the primary 8 views before we begin lighting the object. So here's a look into our daily Capture One workflow. And I think of it like blocking the set direction for a play. And lucky for us, we have the dynamic tools of the Capture One program to label these reference views that can be used later as a guide when you're ready to light and photograph each view. So we work together first to establish height of camera. So you'll see a little bit of movement here. Once we find the height that we want, we lock it in and highlight it here, like I've chosen purple. So once height's set, we move to the first view. And for this guy, it was eyes to front. And then we move along. Once it's in place, we mark it. Continue on to the next view. And on this particular guy, I was so glad I had the curator on set, because I realized that if I was to go to straight 3/4, left front, I would never have gotten a profile of his actual face, because when he's at true profile, I miss his profile of his face. So we added that view in. Moving right along, we want to pay attention to the details. When you're turning to make the decision to have that view as your left profile, make sure that we're not getting an awkward elbow or something else popping forward, right? Same thing in the drapery. So looking along, making sure that if someone was to pull a detail for publications, it would still look good. So we chose that one and we marked it. So moving along, every view you'll see then pops in the purple where the curator said, that's the view I want. I mark it and know I'm going to come back to that and match it for when I'm doing my final shooting. Just moving right along. So this process is really only a 15 to 20-minute meeting, and you got to keep it simple. And every moment you have together is critical, because you want to get in, get out, and just make sure you don't play with your lighting while the curator is on set, because then it could end up being, you know, all day, and you don't want to do that. You want to light on your own and have fun, right? We all want to have fun and enjoy this work that we do, that we're all so passionate about.
Nice gloves, Connie. At the Asian,
We need more.
at the Asian, we're a much smaller institution, and we have myself as the main photographer, and we have David Armstrong, the digital imaging specialist. Somehow, between catalogs, new acquisitions, and the never-ending image request, we get it done. But time, right? I know. Who's got time for this back and forth with other departments? Most of us try to turn around our many views by the end of the day for an important work, and we're lucky if we can stretch it out to a second day of shooting. But I believe that building this time into your production of three-dimensional objects will increase your quality, productivity, and visibility. So with the quality that one gets with a 100 megapixel file, many of these images provide multiple uses. And with three-dimensional work, if you add focus stacking on certain views, there's even more detail and context to share with others. Curators are able to look and provide images across the globe with their peers, researchers. Conservation can use collections photography for condition checking, and then you're able to zoom in on details that are not always visible with the naked eye. Resolution is not everything in the quality of an image. However, we are really enjoying the dimension this adds to the visual assets that we produce today. Your curator, museum stakeholders, and the public at large are very happy and excited with the imagery that you're providing. And this will reduce reshoots and provide a clean, beautiful record for years to come of this object. These assets provide for open content, promotional material, web applications, and let's not forget publications, where it all started. This goes beyond documentation, and when done right, your photography will bring these objects greater visibility. So I know my basic need is to get a good, clean document of the work. A frontal shot, the sides, rear, and bottom, as Tawny illustrated earlier. And then I also do a view that would give it depth, like she had a 3/4 view, usually from both sides. And this is often the angle that I will build my light for, and then build upon for the other views. And as for lighting, I do not want to create my art out of the art. The light needs direction with no strong shadows on the body of the work. So when you go look at details, after that, I can have fun with the few moments I have left with the object. I will play with close-ups. I'll do some shallow depth of field and some moodier lighting perhaps. And perhaps a few portraits if it's a figurative item. Extras, I used to call these. but now they're part of my standard workup if they're a figurative item, like I said. One element of this workflow I dislike is editing these last fun images. I want to keep most of them. And what image gets deleted and what gets kept for the future is a difficult task. But that's my final step in Capture One. The collaboration goes both ways when you work with others. We learned a lot from each other on set when we had this interaction between the curator and the photographer. But I also want to say, don't remember to forget your instincts and follow those. And this object's a great example. We have a large image deadline. We have a series of image deadlines in the calendar year, and one of them is new acquisitions. And everybody wants their photography as soon as possible. So often I was told, just take one ID shot and move on. And so we had this series of contemporary Japanese ceramics that came in, one acquisition a season, and they are detailed and absolutely not symmetrical. And there's no one view of these pieces. And the curators want to put up the work immediately in the galleries to show off their treasure. And the photographs that I was told not to take were so interesting that publishing decided to do a booklet. I'm not sure that's why, but it certainly helped. But this was an early lesson to me that I need to follow my visual instinct. But I have to also balance and be aware. My manager will count objects completed, but the curators count what translates the work well. And the curators always need imagery for their essays. It's like a currency.
So with that said, we move on to the execution part of this discussion. The next point of topic is the importance of lighting three-dimensional objects beyond the traditional two-light left-right flood. That's the usual workflow for most museums. And we want to look at bringing forward light that's more of a dynamic approach, where the main light leads the way. And here are examples of standard two-side light documentation approach versus what we're calling beauty lighting or the fine art approach to reveal shape and dimension to the objects. Remember that proper lighting can make a world of difference on how we see art and bring the story of our objects to life. What do we mean really by this documentation versus beauty? So glad you asked. Let's find out. All right, so how do we see the art that is in front of us? For three-dimensional objects, there's a lot we need to say to tell the story using light as your guide. We need to know how to light these objects to show their true shape and form. It's a craft of tapping into the finer details of your work to bring out the subtleties of the beauty of the object on your set. And this here is the example of Athena, a small marble head. If you can see here on the right, she's being lit now in a way that is the one light leading the way. If you compare to the previous photography of the old, of Legacy, you can see that it was the two-light approach, and we've lost some dimension. We've lost the three-dimensional shape of her face, the beautiful detail in her hair, the texture of the marble. So we want to pay attention to this. On the left, she looks kind of old and sad. On the right, she looks youthful and beautiful and something we want to look at longer. Here's another example. This is Peploforos, the statue of a woman wearing a peplum. But where's the woman? So the design team pulled this object into their studios and started lighting of how they were going to work with light in the galleries. And they pulled me in and they said, look at it, so much dimension. So we brought her into the studio and photographed her again. And you can see here that there's really a leg being revealed. So when photographed properly, where there's a leading light coming from one direction, we pull in the shape and dimension of what this object really looks like. It's no longer a blob of stone, it's actually a person underneath that beautiful flowing fabric. And then here's baby Bacchus. He's one of my favorite. Here he looks sort of like burnt baby. And this is not pre-conservation, but it looks like it should be. Here's his photography today with using the fine art approach, again with a main light leading the way. You can see a big difference in how he's like a chubby, sweet little baby. And before, he didn't have any shape or form with the two light flood from left to right. He even lost some look in his eyes. And it appears almost as if this was a different time, like photographed before he had final conditioning work on him from conservation, and that's not true. It's truly all about light. And then here I've demonstrated the importance of paying attention, that we don't always want to follow the old legacy photography of how the object was positioned. We see an overlapping here of his hand, his left hand across his body. So we made the decision with the curator, another important reason why it's great to have your curator on set. We noticed this together, and so we decided to shift him counterclockwise so that we could get his hand to separate from his body. And then we have this crystal Venus. This object is more about the discussion of position, kind of back to what I just said about baby Bacchus. It came into the studio with the belief that it should be leaning down on this shin here, but it didn't make sense because obviously we've got some parts of her missing, and she really would have been propped up on one knee, as you see here in Antiquity. So we decided to go ahead and make that decision and put with the curator and worked with mount making to put her on the set so that she was leaning on the knee as if the foot was still there. And that really changed the way that we saw her, right? The way that this object reveals on set.
Yes, as Tanya illustrated, there's not one size fits all for lighting of a three-dimensional object or work. Butterfly or two-dimensional lighting will often be okay, but it will not bring out the volume or detail in an object, such as baby Bacchus. One good starting point is often with a strong top light, I have found. You can bring it forward, to the side, to the other side, and then back again. And I find with many of our objects being almost symmetrical, directly overhead can be a really good solution. Finding the right distance from front to back of a set is really what you play with. That's the difference between being able to pull out a detail and some volume over a flat material. And the size of your light is also a factor, not just the distance. And as I said before, every object is different, but you need to experiment. You need to have fun, as she said. The size of your light is a large factor, as well as the distance to the object. But with Capture One tethered, it doesn't take long to see the results of your experimentation and adjustments. I cannot imagine not shooting tethered. It's a wonderful time to be a studio photographer. So our continued vision for telling the story of three-dimensional objects is the final point. And we're looking beyond documentation and what we have learned.
We've learned that this fine art approach of lighting our objects can extend beyond the studio and into the galleries. Our final images can act as a lighting map for our curators and designers. We often work together and walk through the galleries at the Villa with our prints in hand to make sure we're highlighting key elements of an object. It's just another way that collaborating with our curators on set and in the galleries can help build a better brand and show off the full potential and beauty of our objects.
Likewise, at the Asian, we have a new lighting preparator in the galleries. She and I have just started a dialogue together to discuss color of light and different types of work and how they demand different types of lighting and light sources. It's a great conversation. Opening this line of communication and working together as collaborators with photographers and other professionals in the galleries is a benefit to the process as a whole and how we view and display art. We have become a LEED certified building, and the lamps have been retrofitted during this remodel. It's been beneficial to all of us in sharing our understanding of the lighting in the gallery, for example, color, temperature, direction, and the shape of the lighting. We have newer LEDs and they have great benefits and savings. However, we are both challenged by adapting those to the gallery settings. So balancing the line between art and documenting three-dimensional objects is difficult, but it's worth the investment of time and energy. With the rise of 3D capture moving swiftly into studios, it's important to remember that traditional still photography continues to be the authority on documenting the true beauty, color, surface detail of our artifacts. I have found that the fine art approach to photographing objects does not mean a dramatic or snarky image. and that it's important to be able to see into the shadows and reveal the texture of the surface of the highlights without creating a flat image. Also, our museum conservation department, they like the directional lighting approach because the object has shape and form, and this actually helps them during study. And so how is our work being used externally? When I saw these banners going up, I was pleasantly surprised. I never had a discussion with anybody for me to shoot these close-ups. And it didn't take me long after doing these in the normal object workup. Now I see them everywhere. So clearly these images offer something to creative services, curatorial, and marketing. And here's some further evidence of how our work is used within and without the museum. The fusion and expertise and vision of the photographer and the curator opened the storytelling dialogue by creating dynamic images that are used by the scholar for research to the gift shop for the consumer. Again, our audience is our mission.
And our photographs sell books and advertise our exhibitions. It's very exciting. And for the Getty Villa, the collaborative relationship between photographers and curators is becoming more important and perhaps paramount to the success of the brand, for us to work in unison in the studios and in the galleries. We all have a part in how the world interprets art, and we all need each other to work as a team in our combined quest to reveal the history and beauty of these ancient works. Curators are the authority on how these works may have appeared in antiquity, and it's our job to bring that to life.
So in closing, we've enjoyed sharing with you today our point of view on the practice of engaging in collaboration with your fellow museum curators, the importance of how we light three-dimensional objects, and why these components are vital to the business and future of cultural heritage.
We hope we've inspired you to bust a move and invite your curators into your studios and take risks on lighting your three-dimensional objects beyond documentation. So with that, we thank you so much for listening.
And thank you. We're open to questions, I'm guessing, at this point.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Stop sharing.
I guess we better put our faces back up.
Yeah, this is Arnab here. I've been moderating the chat and the questions. So Kevin and Tani, wonderful. We see you. I'm going to go ahead and pop up some questions. And there are a few questions that are kind of like related in groups, so I'll bring those up as well. But the first question is, how do you decide the number of views for an object when you shoot it?
Kevin, you want to answer that? You want me to answer?
Well, I try to cover basically really good documentation. So if you don't have the object and you wanted to know what the front, the side, the back looked like, so that every area, if possible, depending on its size or how fragile it is, has some documentation that's in focus, well lit, and hopefully will provide, use for multiple uses, for conservation, to study, for if anything happened to the object, God forbid, or any case, so for all that. And then I kind of work into what I think a detail that might be wanting. Years ago, people used to photograph a lot of details of things with their SLR or whatever, because the resolution wasn't there. And, especially with two-dimensional objects, that has gone away. You pull details from the large piece. But, angle of view being the big difference in three-dimensional work. So I kind of work on I try to work on the more broader view and then slowly dial into the things that are more sort of ethereal or sort of more emotional at the end. Often I do those really quickly, and so that's why sometimes it's hit or miss. But
yeah.
And then of course I always check with the curator, what is the absolute most important view, and that's when they will determine what's view number one and what's view number two, and that'll be reviewed by the curators.
So for the villa, our beginning starts with what the curator is requesting on the request form. And we'll start there and a shot list will be made. And most of the time it's the standard 4 to 8. And then a lot of times that happens, I don't know about you guys, but the object will land on set and the curator had just requested only, let's say 4 views or 6 views. And we start moving around the object and we're like, oh, there's a lot more going on that we probably need to identify. So it's important to us that the curators have conversations with the conservators, that when that information gets disseminated to us in the request, that everybody's had a conversation first before it comes to us, but that doesn't, that's ideal, but that doesn't always happen. So if something comes on set, this happens a lot, and we, as photographers and artists, we see a view that we just like, oh, that's just so beautiful. If it's easy, like Kevin was saying, easy to do, we'll do it quickly and, beautifully, and we'll add that onto the shot list.
There are a couple of questions sort of around the same thing. So we have a few questions about how you shoot very large pieces. So first off, when you shoot very large pieces, how do you handle those sort of physically? And then do you shoot multiple images and tile them? Do you use a turntable to change views? What would your approach to shooting an extremely large 3D object be?
I don't shoot as many large stuff as Kevin does, but I'll quickly, we use a turntable that's flat, pretty close flat to the ground, that can hold about 4,000 pounds. And we rely so incredibly on our preparator team. We trust them, we adore them. They come in and they bring the object on set. They will advise on many levels of their expertise on safety. But a lot of times if it's on a turntable, once it's set up, I'm given a lot of freedom to turn the object as I need to, wearing gloves, obviously. And as long as the safety and balance of the object on the turntable, then we're good to go. So Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't take a single photograph without conservation and prep. And in registration too. I'm beholden to them. So yeah, I'm always very nice to prep. As far as the large objects, yes, I have that turntable that Tani has is on my shopping list. But we'll put sometimes if it's really heavy, I try to do as much as I can by myself, only because, as far as handling the object to a certain point, we do Mylar strips underneath. Teflon strips we'll put underneath. I think, Tani, you
Yep.
put some Mylar down below sometimes so you can rotate things without too much help. Other people have jobs to do too. So, but of course, the safety of the object comes first. Mm-hmm. So if there's not enough people to handle it, it doesn't get shot that day. It's really that simple. Yep. So the scheduling of the larger objects is always challenging, especially if there's an exhibit going up at the same time or something like that. Mm-hmm. So that's part of collaboration. You really have to work together on that.
Right. And to that point, right, that could be weeks in the planning. It's not something that just jumps in and it's like, oh, we're going to do this tomorrow. Are you free? You don't want to work that way. It has to be a good plan, a solid plan, and everybody on deck together.
That is a perfect lead into the next question, which is from William at the Smithsonian. He's asking, do you have a registrar or conservator in the room with you? At SI, you have to have one, and the conservators often don't want the actual object placed in. So do you guys use mock-ups, and how do you do that?
So I'll answer real quick. We don't always have a conservator on set, and the registrar either. It is only if, we've been doing this, but I think it depends also on who's shooting, but as someone who's been here now for 15 years, there's a lot of training that we go through for handling objects. So we handle a lot of the objects ourselves, and the conservators will come in usually upon our request, or if there's an object that they are particularly sensitive about that is super frail, like we have these golds, beautiful golds, like are paper thin, and they will handle them and we won't. And actually, you know what, all to them, let them handle it. We don't want to handle that stuff. But we do not have someone always on set every time, but they are in the building. So if we need them, they are available to us.
Yeah, we have certain objects that are flagged to be handled by conservators. I think a couple of things. We have some lacquer from the Song Dynasty or something. It's, oh my gosh, it's amazing it exists. And so I don't want to touch that stuff either. Textiles also, I'll ask for help. Certain paintings, yeah. I answering all that. There was a previous question about all the different views. Yes, I do photograph the bottom if I can get to it. That's especially true with ceramics. It's very important to get the seal or whatever marks are on the bottom. Someone asked that earlier. But yeah, it's a matter of trust too, training and trust. So it's time, you know, you have to know your limitations. That's really important. That if you get into a situation, you're like, I should not be doing this alone.
Mm-hmm.
That's back to the collaboration and communication.
Right. Don't want to have a headache on set when you're trying to touch art. You want to be feeling really good.
And I will also add to that, at the end of the day, I try to like say, stop, slow down. You can get this done tomorrow.
Right.
And also, it being in California, if you go for lunch, is this thing safe to sit on set or should it be laid down or whatever? And so
Yeah,
I always check with prep or whoever it is. Even going for your break, you have to, as you saw the sandbags on Tawny's set, you know, you strap it down. You really have to take more precautions than you would ever think. So that's all very important.
And that also, the question about the views leads back into something we had a lot of questions about, which is focus stacking. So John asks, do you focus stack for every 3D object or not? And if not, what lenses do you use to get everything in focus?
Okay, I'll start because we focus stack everything. That's what we do at the Villa anyway. It's part of our standard practice. When we switched from view cameras to the medium format model with the digital back. So we focus stack everything. And if we want selective focus, that's rare for us at the Getty now, unless it's requested.
So I focus stack, especially, well, smaller objects. I always make sure I have a version where everything's in focus, and if not, that I focus stack. And I've been doing some focus stacking where I don't use the automated. I'll just do like 2, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes manually, sometimes not. I'll use the live view to actually focus stack, and then I always test the focus stack to make sure it works. In our workflow, I hand it off to David, and then we use Zareen, and he stacks it. But some of those figurative portrait views, I do not focus stack on purpose. In fact, I'll open up a little bit. As far as I'll try to get it in one shot, and I'm on a phase 1 also, and my 120 is the go-to, and I'll go to the 80 if I want to get it, or I'll even back up a little bit because there's so much resolution. I can back up a little bit and get it in one shot. So I try to look at my day, my week. Can I get everything done? It's focus stacking. And sometimes it's hard to get to the camera to actually set it up. That's a feature I've been asking for. I'm sure many of us are out there asking, can I control focus stacking from my Capture One?
Yes.
But we'll talk about that later, right? So
you guys are working on that, right?
I got the tilt shift lens. I have to say I went and got that, and it's a tough animal to use, and it's not as good glass as the other ones, but it's got me out of a couple pinches, I have to say. But it's a challenging lens. If you haven't used a view camera, it's not the lens for you. But maybe I'm wrong. It's probably great for portraits.
Specific question that we have from someone, which is, do you use a view camera anymore?
Nope.
I keep looking at them online going, hey, I can put that on there. And
We have them. They're so sad. They're in the cabinet, and we look at them, and we're like, hi. No, we don't use them.
Yeah, no. I'm still a big fan of tilt shift. We still have a Nikon with some tilt shift lenses, but I can't say I pull them out. And, you know, you can't focus stack with a tilt shift. Don't even try it. It's a mess. So, no, I wish we could. You know, we had a larger sensor, and I could see where I would do some architectural work, maybe some gallery work, but then I would just probably go with a field camera. So that's my answer.
Several questions about lighting. So if we switch over to those, there were several questions about using polarization. So do you guys ever use, you know, polarized light, cross polarization filters in your images? And if so, how?
Yes, we do. for especially for vases, vase photography, for black attic vases in antiquity. We always photograph with double polarization, so polarization on the lights and polarization on camera, and we adjust till everything goes black with zero reflections, and then we pull back the highlights. Usually in the past, we used to do it with the polarizer on camera, but Rebecca Truskowski in our studio, our senior photographer, started shooting bronze with the new concept to move the lights, turn the lights instead of, the actual shift, the shapers, and instead of moving on camera. And she's pulled together some gorgeous work by using this technique, and I've been following her footsteps. And it doesn't work for everything as far as bronze, but vases and everything else, like, boy, she's really put together a beautiful technique, and we've adopted it into our workflow.
Yeah, if I had the bandwidth, I would love to be able to do both and then be able to actually layer them in Photoshop and maybe pull out details or whatever. I frankly don't. And we don't have works like that or so detailed. It's more about glazes. I try to light where I have some reflection, just enough to tell you that it's a shiny object. I personally get very frustrated with every time I polarize or cross polarize. I always get frustrated, but I have done it on a few occasions, but it's not part of our standard workflow.
So we do have several questions. First of all, everybody is obsessed with your lighting. They love it, absolutely love it. And so we have a question: do you keep a library of images whose lighting solutions you like? And then do you also keep like a record of your lighting diagrams, for future reference? And some people are also asking, excuse me, if you would share some of those.
Well, what we do is set shots. It's our standard. Every photographer at the villa will photograph a set shot. It's sort of our requirement, and it helps us look back and see, what worked, what didn't work. We shoot it from all different angles to have it in our back pocket. I've been pulling together those set shots as a ton of a tutorial for new photographers coming in, so that we can show some new standards and what we're doing now at the Getty with new branding. So we're kind of going across platforms throughout different photography departments within the Getty, not just the villa. And it's very, very important. And I'm hoping at some point we can collaborate even deeper with the rest of the Getty and come together and actually have something someday to publish. That would be awesome. But for now, it's all set shots.
That's a great thing, and I wish I did it more. What I also wish, and this is a fantasy, is I use ProPhoto, and there used to be a nice module in Capture One, and it's kind of disappeared. But boy, it'd be great if you could somehow write the ProPhoto pack power into the image.
Oh,
the
yes.
EIP. That would be so awesome, because occasionally I do have a reshoot and I have to go back and match something. And I have enough experience where I can do that and look at an image and go, okay, this is probably what I did, but boy, it'd be nice to be able to pull that up again. But that's a fantasy. Who knows? Maybe not. And as far as set shots, no, I was an assistant. I used to work for some photographers that kept incredibly detailed books of every single set they did. And I wish I had the forward thinking for that, because that'd be great. I have a lot of old Polaroids of all these sets I used to do, but I love Polaroids, but it's the same thing. So occasionally I will step back and take a shot. I'll take the camera back and I'll shoot it, or I'll just use my iPhone, which doesn't have great color, frankly, with tungsten lighting. We're using strobe. I think we'll be getting some questions about that. I'm definitely interested in some of the more continuous lighting coming up, but the light shaping, strobe light shaping has become so good. It's sort of hard to walk away from that.
This next question that I've popped up here, which is, what type of lighting are you using, strobe or LED, or question mark? So Kevin, I believe you answered that. Tani?
Well, I can only speak for the villa right now, but we use strobe, all the time, every day. We don't do LED. We don't use LEDs yet. I'm sure that's coming. And I've seen other, like the Met. The Met's been using LEDs, and I mean, obviously, Kurt would have to speak to that. But someday I'd like to transition. I mean, that'd be cool because it's it's better for the art, as we've all talked about. But right now, it's all strobe, brawn color.
Got it. And your curators and conservators don't freak out about that?
Well, we don't, at the Villa, we don't have light sensitive, so it's different. You've got, and we don't shoot flat art really at the Villa either. So we don't have the same constraints that the Getty Center has. So the experts over at the center can talk on that point. What about you, Kevin? Do you guys have light sensitive stuff?
Oh yes, quite a lot. And I've learned from your good folks over at the center that it's the modeling light lamps that are the true villain, because they emit a lot of UV.
Right.
And this is where, like, I'll be doing a small piece of lacquer and I'll do focus stacking. I'm like, can this thing really handle 200 pops? So I try to err on the other side. It's all about continuous lighting, and I'm sure there's ways of mathematically, adding it all up. I try not to be excessive, with lighting or leaving things out. But yeah, light sensitivity is an issue, and I know we basically have rotations for 6 months at a time for a lot of our light sensitive materials in the gallery for that exact purpose. They don't stay up very long, and they go away for a couple decades, or at least a decade. So yeah, that's an issue, and I'm sure there's many people who could speak to that better on this forum. Yeah, UV lighting, I know that's bad. And that's what modeling lights have. So I turn them off.
Not good at scan either.
No. Good question.
The next question we have a series of questions on is around 3D imaging and photogrammetry. So there are a few questions about, do you do it? If so, how do you do it? And then my favorite question here, which I'm going to pull up right here, is, will 2D photography disappear and 3D be the new standard?
Kevin, you should talk.
Well, people are still shooting black and white photographs, right? Although probably not for condition checking, but black and white is the color. What color is the 3D? I mean, whatever. So I do some photogrammetry. I don't do a lot of it. I don't have the time for it, because I think anybody who's done it well knows it's not the simplest process. I don't think it's there for color and especially surface texture. I have found that why I've seen education and other departments use some of my photogrammetry and do flybys for presentations or videos next to the work. My personal opinion is it shouldn't be too close to the work, because the work is right there. Why would you want to look at a movie? But some of them are really great, but the color's not quite there. The surface texture is not quite there. I know there's a lot of people doing a lot of great work on it, and it will get simpler. It'll get easier. It'll become more accurate. I don't know if our book's going to disappear. I mean, that's really the question, right? Are billboards going to disappear? I don't see that really. I don't see it ending. I just think it complementing.
Right.
I want to throw out there a lot of curators. I have found a lot of I don't get a lot of sort of excitement about 3D models from curators, and their first sort of stopping point is the texture and the color. I think someone very high up in our organization said it looks like a cartoon, and that's flat. That just goes nowhere. And I think among people, curators, especially who have the object, living in their heads. I mean, they've been studying these objects for decades, some of these curators, and they know them intimately in the history. The object just doesn't work. I mean, the 3D object doesn't work. Now, as far as being able to look at it scientifically and review it and study it and compare it, like, cloud compare, there's an amazing amount of tools, looking at damage, looking at condition checking. I think 3D is great. And it's only going to get better. But is it photography? I don't think it's not going to replace it. We still have AM and FM, so I don't know.
I totally agree with Kevin, but I know that the Getty obviously is working. We've seen the presentation from Todd Swanson, which is fantastic, about where we're moving and what we're testing and learning about photogrammetry and how it will integrate into our new systems of seeing the art. Curators, conservators, what use is it besides web right now, of viewing it to show an object spinning around and enjoying what that object looks like in that environment. But the real life photography that we're doing, I'm just not seeing the crossover yet. I'm sure it's coming. Replacing, God, I hope not, but that's my opinion. But I am excited about where we're going with this. And I'm excited that the Getty's taking great strides and working really hard. Ted Swanson and his group and others in conservation across the villa, across the center of the Getty, they're all coming together and making great strides and doing some really, really cool, beautiful work. So I hope when you guys have a chance, you can see Todd's presentation. But right now at the villa, I can't say that we're actually moving on that yet, except being led by what Todd has been working on at the GRI.
The next question we have, and it comes from Daniel. Do you use color reference targets, and which ones do you use?
So real quick, we're using Don Williams as a quick onset for scale and a quick check. For three-dimensional objects, I am not a strong, I'm not strong in the idea that I'm going to follow a color checker, and that's going to make everybody's hair stand up on end at this moment. All the scientists are freaking out. But for three-dimensional objects, you've got lights coming from all different angles. It's so different than 2D when you're doing copy work. And so I literally will use the old Macbeth card, and I'll take a shot, have that as a color reference. And then after we're done shooting, we will bring the object into our viewing room, which is state-of-the-art lighting and color corrected. And we will do an eye-to-eye color correction right then and there on 3D. Remember, I want to make sure that I'm being clear on three-dimensional objects only. And make sure that we get as close match as we can to the art. And that's how we're working it right now at the Villa. Kevin?
Yeah, I have a target in everything. Somewhere, some kind of target, because I will tell you an early story where I got burned. I was photographing a Japanese contemporary, well, relatively contemporary bronze, and I got to photograph, I got on set, and I don't know if you know with the phase and any dirt, it's like, oh my gosh, this thing has never been cleaned. It came from it was a recent donation, and it was basically covered with household dust, you know, hadn't been cleaned. So I had to go through all kinds of people to get it cleaned, and they said, yes, you can clean it, yes, you can clean it. Well, they cleaned it, and I photographed it, and it's a totally different color. It wasn't the gray that it originally was. It's now this bright orange. Everybody's like, what is this? And I go, well, hang on. And I went to go look, and I did not have a photo with a color card in it.
Oops.
And I was flat. I was caught. You know, I didn't have a reference. So a color card, you know, whatever you use, you should use something. But I do like, I'll use those tiny little Macbeths. I love those for really small things. But, you know, it's what's white, what's black, what's in between. You really need that. As what Tawny's kind of referring to also is about, you know, your tone curve, your contrast. Every piece of art is different. And, you know, what you see on set and what it's so hard. And I know a lot of people are really working on it, and I applaud them. It's a really and then I find that, you know, curators, I guess, sometimes will get their hands on these images and they'll just pump the contrast up. So it's this really difficult balancing act, because you can control your image up to a certain point, and after that you can't. So it's really important for us to try to find that nice balance between science and perception. And this is a whole nother, we could do a whole webinar on just this particular topic, frankly.
Right. And I see, yeah,
back
go
to
ahead.
phase. I mean, the phase does a great job with with the canned profiles you guys have right now.
Oh yeah,
it's pretty sweet. In fact, I feel like I really shouldn't be playing with them. Now, I will make my own profiles for 2D stuff, perhaps, but not for 3D. I don't. I'm not going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Tawny.
Oh no, I love my IQ3 tri-chromatic back. It's just, color is just supreme. And yeah, I see.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
see
going
our
back to
not
the 4x5 thing, that's, it's like, to me, it's the closest thing I've had to a 4x5 in color and density and resolution. And it's just like shooting a chrome, it's better than shooting an E6, an E100 plus or back in the day. So it's got better resolution than a 4x5 transparency. And to me, that's the gold standard.
And so that actually leads into a couple of things. Kevin, there are a couple of questions for you, and I'm popping it up on screen here. Did I understand correctly that you do all new acquisitions for a year as one project?
Who's asking this question? Christopher. Hi. So as I understand it, before I got there, they weren't. And then now acquisitions have become a very big part of our calendar year. We've been doing a lot of acquiring of more contemporary work. And so there's been an acceleration. We'll do 2 or 3, I think we even did 4 once, acquisition meetings in a year. And they'll use some dealer photos, but they like not to. And yeah, and so my attitude has been, they're like, shoot it, but don't shoot it. And I'm like, well, which is it? And then it's on set. I'm like, if it's on set and it's clean and it's functional and it's fairly in its solid state, not falling apart, I will shoot as much as I can because I won't have to shoot this thing and handle it again. It's for its own good. It's not for me. And so, they'll say, we'll come back. I just feel like the one shot thing is such a ridiculous, it's such a ridiculous way of doing things. We don't have the bandwidth to do sort of what I would call digitization, where we'll shoot all the snuff bottles and we'll shoot all the bronzes. I have to kind of circle around. If that answers your question, I try to get as much as I can of something so it doesn't have to come back into the studio for another couple decades, hopefully.
Mm.
That is a majority of the questions.
Okay.
If you guys want to look through them, if you check the chat, there's a little question mark. And if there are any you see in there that we haven't answered that you want to get to in the last couple of minutes here.
Also, I'll mention that you can send any additional questions to info@digitaltransitions.com.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And I think we're definitely, this presentation is definitely more about 3-dimensional object photography. Maybe that's the 2D, all the 2D questions and how we shoot 2D with glass, not glass, that kind of stuff. I think that's, maybe we can answer those questions offline since we're really focusing here on 3-dimensional and how to photograph those objects beautifully.
And I'll mention that next week's Project Lemonade session is Ben Court from Portland Art Museum speaking about focus stacking.
Hey, Ben.
So we hope you'll all join us, and it's a great presentation. And anything else, Kevin, Tawny, that you want to say?
Anything
Well,
in there?
I think we all have a lot in common, and I think all our institutions do things slightly differently. I think where Tawny and I kind of connected was we realized there was a lot of similarities in this. It's sort of like the way departments are walled off in a museum. And I think that's kind of where we kind of began this, was sort of trying to show, how we're relevant to the whole product, the whole project, the product, the visibility. There's a question here about lighting, Tawny, for instance. I think this is a great example about, do you get to consult with the lighting for an exhibition?
Oh, yeah. We are now starting to. The design, the head curator will come sometimes and say, I saw the photo online and it's gorgeous. We love it. Can you make me a print? Because I want to take it with me into the gallery and I want to walk with it. And we want to, talk with the lighting team, which is not part of the photography team at all, to light the object in the gallery. And a lot of times, as people know me, I'll insert myself. I'll be like, I want to go. Can I go with you? And they're actually fine with that sometimes, because they do want to get our input. We've got some skills, right? I mean, we've got some incredible experience in lighting these objects, and we just photographed it, right? We just did a whole workup, Kevin. Like, we just shot the damn thing all the way around it, and we've got a unique, intimate view into how to light these objects and how the light fell on the object. So I actually think it's beneficial, and I think it should be part of the process and how the installations go up. Bring the photographer in. Let us walk with you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, hey, can you move that light a little bit more that way and angle a little bit, because you'll get more on the abs and how this thing, like, take a look at this photo. So I know I'm over explaining, but I'm actually really passionate about this part of the collaboration, because I think we're being underutilized
Yes.
as
Yeah.
photographers.
Okay. That's a wrap. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Stay
Carol.
healthy, and we'll see you next week on the next Project Lemonade
Thanks,
session.
guys. Thank you so much for hosting.
Okay,
If anybody wants to
bye.
reach out to me, please do.
Okay. All right. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Goodbye.
Bye, Carol.